Welcome inside episode 715 of the Locked On Senators podcast. I'm Ross Levitan on the outskirts of enemy territory in Winnipeg, Manitoba, alongside Brandon Piller up in the Blue Mountains, and we have a very special guest coming up on today's show. It's former Stanley Cup champion and now NHL analyst Mike Rupp.
Yeah, this was an all-time interview. We get into his early playing days, battling up against the Sens, and of course, his time with the Danbury Trashers.
Oh, great interview. I hope you guys enjoy it. It's all coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Senators podcast. It's your team every day.
Your Locked On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
I'm Jake Sanderson, and you're listening to the Locked On Senators podcast.
I'm Tim Stützle, and you're listening to the Locked On Senators podcast.
Thank you for making Locked On Senators your first listen on this Tuesday, January 17th. The show is free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube, where the best way you can help the show grow is to like every video by clicking the thumbs up and subscribing to the Locked On Senators channel. Pilsy, I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is part one of our interviews with Mike Rupp because we got to have him back. That was just story after story from Ray Emery and beyond.
Yeah, for a guy that never played for the Sens, he had a lot of great Sens-related stories, and you could just tell he's one of those old-school hockey guys that just has probably an entire book worth of fun stories that we could get into. So definitely appreciate Mike Rupp joining the show today. It's awesome.
Guess how long I asked him to come on for?
I'm going to say the classic Ross Levitan, 15 to 20 minutes.
15 to 20 minutes. We have about 49 minutes coming up with Mike Rupp. Before we get to that, though, the Sens lose again 2-1 last night. Now that you've slept on it, how are you feeling about that?
I mean, it's just disappointment because that was a great effort. And we're a hashtag goalie-friendly show, Ross, but the last 4 games, the Senators goalies have been, in my mind, the biggest reason why this team hasn't been able to win. I mean, they get the win in Arizona, but that's a free card on the bingo spot there. You should get that win. And Forsberg didn't exactly shut the door on them anyways. So this is going to be an interesting thing to keep an eye on as we go forward, as the Senators, they're having trouble scoring goals, and the goalies aren't able to steal them any wins here.
1 goal last night, that's not going to get it done, right? We could talk about the Cam Talbot miscue, but at the same time, the only reason that was the game-winning goal is because they scored 1 goal, and it was their first even-strength goal in over 100 minutes of action. So it's tough times right now, but good news. The portal is now open for the Senators' finances, according to Bruce Garriock. We'll keep our eye on that. I would pay a few dollars. I'd pay probably like $25 to see it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the going rate.
If you want more on last night's postcast or on last night's game, you can join the postcast available wherever you get your podcast. Shout out to Jack Richardson for joining us. And Jack Richardson, poor guy, having a tough schedule with our postcast. Seems like he only comes on after losses. And that almost goes hand in hand. Our good friend Fighting Stützle on Twitter out in Newfoundland put out an alarming stat. Did you see this stat?
No, let's hear it.
The Ottawa Senators, when they're on TSN this year, are 16-11-3. When they're on Sportsnet, they're 3-10-0.
Yeah, but the Sportsnet broadcasts are just terrible in all aspects here. Yikes.
Hey, by the way, the one good part, Keith Yandel, the addition to the intermission. How about his story with Parker Kelly? He said game 82 last year, he was with Philly. It's his last game in the NHL, and Parker Kelly keeps running him. So Keith Yandel says he turned to him and said, buddy, this is my final game in the NHL. Don't think I won't snap my stick over your head and go out that way.
Yeah, I don't have to worry about sussies. Yeah.
That was awesome. All right, speaking of awesome, we got a great interview coming up with Mike Rupp. I've thought about whether or not I'm overselling it, and the answer is no. This is just fantastic conversation. The perfect mix, a guy who's been there and done that, and a guy who's a great storyteller. So let's get to our interview with Mike Rupp. It's going to take us pretty much through the rest of the show.
And today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at betonline.net. Guys, it's the trusted online sportsbook for the Locked On Podcast Network, and for a good reason. They got all the latest odds, news, scores, updates, podcasts, whatever you want to get your info on how to make a smart sports bet. You can find it with our friends over at betonline.net. And it's not just hockey, guys. They got football. The wild card weekend was wild, that's for sure. I'm sure the divisional round will be just as crazy, as there's lots of massive kind of heavy hitters going head to head. Basketball is on. You got golf, boxing, UFC, whatever you like. You can find the best odds at BetOnline. So go to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. Guys, it's betonline.net, where the game starts.
All right, here he is. NHL Stanley Cup Champion, NHL Network Analyst, it's Mike Rupp. All right, we now welcome on a very, very special guest, the native of Cleveland, Ohio. This twice drafted power forward carved out an 11-year NHL career, and he scored the Stanley Cup clinching goal for the New Jersey Devils in 2003. Now he's an analyst for the NHL Network and co-host of That's Hockey Talk under the Pat McAfee content umbrella. Pat, Mike Rupp, welcome to Locked On Senators. How you doing today, man?
I'm good, guys. Thanks for having me on. I'm pumped to come on here and talk a little bit about one of my favorite teams to look forward to in the future. And I was hoping it was this year, but maybe not so much. But I'm still happy to be here. Thank you.
Well, now everyone's fired up to hear what these takes are coming, but we got a lot to get. We always start with the beginning, though. How did you fall in love with hockey? I mean, there's no team in Ohio back when you were growing up. What was the origin?
So my neighbor played 2 doors down. He was older than me, 2 years older than me. And, I played every sport growing up. And when I was about 6 years old, 5 or 6, I'd go on the drive. He'd be on the driveway playing, just shooting, he'd be shooting tennis balls against his garage. And I'd go over there. I didn't know how to hold a stick, didn't know anything about it. I knew that Eddie played hockey, right? And I looked up to Eddie, so I kind of told my mom I wanted to play hockey. So first thing I needed to do is learn how to skate. So I was in Learn to Skate program. And then basically I started playing it, and just how different it was at that time growing up in Ohio. I was the only kid, not just in my grade, in my entire elementary school that played hockey. I was the only kid I knew outside of Eddie that played, right? So it became kind of like my thing, and I liked it because it was like what's differentiated me from other kids. You know, I felt like I did something cool that they didn't really know about. So it was that's kind of how I got into it, and kind of just fell in love with it.
Yeah, and rumor has it you're a 2-time Ohio school hockey state champion, so not a big deal there. But when did hockey become like, not just like you said, mentioned something cool that you did that was different, but when were you starting to think like, hey, this could be a career for me?
Yeah. So, and hockey wasn't that huge in Ohio. It's grown immensely since, but it's still not a hockey hotbed, obviously, in the United States. And so I was playing in the same travel program that I played from the get-go, from 6 years old. Eventually got to the point where they had our I guess, AAA or travel program, and I played there. And the next move was kind of when I was going into grade 9, was going to play high school hockey. And I went to this all boys Catholic high school to play hockey, like literally to play. I didn't grow up. I'm not Catholic. I didn't go there for any other reason but to play hockey, right? So I went there, and it was cool. We won. I was freshman. There's 2 of us, freshmen on varsity. We won state championship freshman year, sophomore year. And around that sophomore year is when I kind of started was on the radar of USA Hockey and started doing some of their under 16 teams and all that stuff. So I started to see how I compared to other 1980 birth years out there. And former Sen, David Legwan, and I were kind of the number 1, 2 1980 birth years as forwards for Americans. So I kind of knew that there was some sort of future there. And then my junior year, I went and played for the Cleveland Barons in the North American Hockey League. I only played about 20 games. I wanted to go back to high school. It sounds funny now, but I want to go back to high school and try to win another state championship, because that was cool for me at that time. It's like the student body was there. You know, we had, you know, I know the student body, you may be like, well, there's a bunch of guys there. Well, we had all girls schools that we would partner up with. So it was like a cool social environment. I wanted to get back to that. Right. So I remember at that time I stopped playing for the junior team, and I was advised, like, this is going to hurt your hockey career. Like, what are you doing? You can't do this right now. Cause this is when I'm 16, 17. So I'm like a year away from 2 years away from my draft year. And I guess what really cranked it up to another level is my high school coach told me in my junior year, you're not coming back next year. I won't let you back next year. You need to move on. And his name was is Bob Whidden, was my high school coach. He played in the WHA for he played for a bunch of teams, but I think they were the Cleveland Crusaders at the time. And so he said to me, let me make a couple phone calls. So this is the reason why I'm going here. This is pretty cool. This is kind of why I knew that I had an opportunity. We had a game in high school hockey against our biggest rival in Cleveland, and Bobby Orr came in to scout me for the game. And so Bob Whidden, which was my coach, had a relationship with Bobby Orr, and that's when Bobby Orr was starting his it was at the time Wolf Associates, but it's the Orr Group, the agency. So that was pretty big news in Cleveland, that Bobby Orr was in town watching some high school player, and so that was so cool to meet him and really just kind of use him as an advisor, or have him as an advisor in his program. So it was something cool that kind of let me know that I had an opportunity here.
And was that a part of deciding the OHL was the route for you?
So I had a verbal commitment at Michigan State, and I actually missed the opt-in date for the OHL draft. I was going to Michigan State. And then I went up. Part of the process was going up and watching some games, and I watched Joe Thornton and Sault Ste. Marie. I was watching him, and I went up to a couple games, and the closest thing for me was Plymouth or Detroit area, right, to head up from Cleveland to watch some games. And you know, I was 6'5", 215 as a junior in high school, sophomore in high school. So I was big, but I didn't have to play physical. I didn't have to. I was so much. Again, I was playing weak hockey. I was so much better than everyone else and bigger than everyone else that I felt like at that time, I'm like, I kind of need to learn the pro game here. Like, I mean, if just because I'm big doesn't mean this is gonna work at the next level. And I felt like the OHL at that time was the best way to kind of throw me to the wolves, if you will, and learn, kind of get a crash course on the physicality of hockey. So that's why I went to the OHL.
I like it. Pretty successful time there. You got to play with some good players. One of my old coworkers at TSN, Carlo Coliaco. I saw you were on the Erie Otters together there. But what was the entire OHL experience like for you?
It was great. It was great. It was different because, again, I still remember going in there, and we were playing against the Sarnia Sting. And I don't think I've even really fought to this point, and outside of scrums and hockey with your gloves on, giving guys little pops in the face, right? And so I was there, and obviously I'm coming in, and you're a target. Like I know I'm a target. I'm 6'5", 215. For guys that actually know how to play the physical game, and they look on, you're reading the stats pack before the game, and this kid's from Cleveland, Ohio, like, oh, we're going after him, right? So I got a lot of that right away. And I remember we were playing against the Sarnia Sting, and they had an overager on their team. I didn't know anything about anybody. I didn't know who was tough, who was skilled, what guys did, anything. I knew nothing about the OHL. And so one of the first games, I'm going out for a face-off, and there's a whistle. I'm skating out to the draw at the far end, and all of a sudden this guy next to me just goes, hey kid, you want to go? And I look at him, I turn, I'm like, oh yeah, okay. And I drop my glove, and he goes, whoa, wait till the face-off. Like, what are you doing? we're on the way from the bench to the circle. And I remember in that moment, like I'm like nervous, and I'm like, oh yeah, no, totally. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about that detail. Like, but I had no idea about anything. So I turn around to go pick my gloves up, And as I'm picking my gloves up, I'm like, I look like an idiot right now. And I'm like, and then something just went off in my head, and I'm like, no, you want to fight? We're gonna fight now. And he's like, what? And I just went in there and got in this fight, and I did pretty well. And from then on, I'm like, all right, I think I could do this, And it was an eye opener though, because I think growing up and just having a ton of friends and getting to experience hockey in Canada, like Canadians grow up with, it's a different game than the way I grew up with it, right? And it's something I had to learn, and I kind of had to have a crash course in it.
I mean, Pillsy could skate before he could walk. Like the rumor is he was coming out of the womb with his skates on. So no, hey, you just missed DJ Smith in Windsor by 1 year. He was the captain the year before you got there. Was his aura still around the room?
100%. I knew. So we had a very veteran team. When I was there in Windsor, we were projected as being a Mem Cup favorite, or one of the favorites to go to the Mem Cup out of the OHL, obviously. And we struggled out of the gates. Like, we had a very veteran laden squad, and everyone, the guys that were there last year, DJ Smith. Like, this guy was crazy. He was tough as nails. He was this and that. So I never met DJ, but I always heard these things. So when he got this job in Ottawa, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, and I knew that he's got the coaching experiences, kind of coached his way up. But I'm like, you know what? This team's going to have a little bit of an edge in the way they play, because you don't play that way as a player and have a career that way and not have some sort of that kind of falling into the team that you're coaching now. So I heard about him a lot. I've seen a lot of fight tapes and crazy moments, but I never got to meet him.
Hey, sorry, Pillsy, I just want to finish off with a stat, and then I want you to ask your question. DJ Smith in the OHL with Windsor, 188 games, 143 points, 650 PIMs.
He could play too. You know what I mean? That's a lot of PIMs for 100 and some games. So
Brian McGrath numbers.
No kidding. Now, Rupper, as an American guy, like you mentioned that you had a verbal commitment to Michigan and then you ended up going to the OHL. Was there a bit of I don't know, for lack of a better word, like a stigma for American players being like, we don't really want to go to the CHL or play in Canada? Like, college hockey is the better route and we need to stay developing in the US? Or what was that decision like? Was there two totally different kind of worlds there between college and junior?
Yeah. So, but at that time, I think it's changed a lot. The game's changed a lot, and since then. But again, I'm a 1980 birth year, and at that time, the OHL major junior was the better option. And I think college is caught up in a lot of ways, and it's probably equal. It's a wash. You got to look at other things make that a part of your decision making. But if you go play college hockey now, you're not going to hurt your chances of making it to the NHL. Where back then, maybe you were. We didn't know. It was a little unproven. But that year, yes, there was a stigma with USA Hockey. This is where it got. Listen, there's politics in Hockey Canada. There's politics everywhere. We know from your guys. Going up in whatever hockey and youth hockey, there's politics everywhere, and it stinks, and I hate it, right? And but there was 1980 birth years were the guinea pig year for the national team development program in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And so we know what that kind of success that is now, right? We've seen all the players that have played there, and Kachucks and the Hughes brothers, and I mean you can go on and on.
Josh Norris, half the Sens.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's a bona fide juggernaut of a program now. We know this, but then we didn't know anything about it. So I'm 1 year away from my NHL draft year, and I'm being told, well, we're trying to get these players together, the best Americans together, to go up there, and we're not going to play in a league. We're going to scrimmage against OHL teams, scrimmage against USHL teams. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm thinking, we're not playing in a league. Like, what?
Yeah, that seems weird.
Yeah, and it's like we're all going to be 17-year-olds. We're going to play against 19 and 20-year-olds and whatever. I mean, it just didn't feel like it was a good fit. So I ended up going to the OHL. David Langwan goes to the OHL. We're pretty much, I think, the two, the bigger 80 birth years that went on to there. And it was I was never going to play on the World Junior team. It's like I burned my bridge. You know what I mean? Like it's like I got drafted 9th overall by the New York Islanders, and I wasn't even necessarily getting an invite for the camp, and 2 months later, or 3 months later for the pre-camp. And eventually I think they had to invite me because of where I was drafted. It would look foolish if they didn't. First cuts year 1, first cut year 2. And it's just like, I'm like, all right, whatever. So I think that we've kind of gotten past that a little bit to some stretch, but you know, I don't know. I mean, I know that I play with Timmy Connolly, one of the best, most talented players I ever played with. He was in the OHL as a kid from Syracuse. He barely played at World Juniors. He was the most talented player on that team, and he barely played in the tournament. So that was a stigma at that time, being a U.S.-born player going and playing the Canadian Hockey League for sure.
Yeah, that's crazy to think of now because, like you mentioned, it's so different. But you talked about it a little bit there. You were drafted by the Islanders in 1998, and then drafted again by the Devils. So was that just a part of the process? Things weren't working out with the Islanders, and you wanted a fresh change, or how did that whole thing go down?
So I was projected a mid to late first rounder, and I got drafted 9th overall. So obviously it's a lot higher than what I was thinking. I was a player just from, I mean, you can kind of get the gist of it just from what we spoke on. I was a raw kid as far as my hockey talent, right? Like I was big. I was always a point getter growing up, and but my numbers weren't. I'm getting drafted in the first round. I mean, I played high school hockey through my junior year, and my senior year in high school was my first year in the OHL, and I got drafted after the year. So really, I played high school hockey and then OHL and then drafted. So there's a lot of like what ifs with me, right? Like, what is this kid going to be? Because my point total, I think that year was 27 points in the OHL or 30 some points in the OHL or something. I don't know. It wasn't much because everybody else around me in the draft was 80 points, 90 points, 100 points, right?
Yeah, 27 between the two squads.
Yes. So there's, you're going to be taking a chance. The Islanders took a chance at 9 on me. And that process, for those that don't know, you get 2 years. So I got drafted in June. You have till June 1st, 2 years later, to sign with your club. And I knew it was always going to be like an 11th hour signing because I needed to prove over the next 2 years that I'm going to be climbing, right? And so anyways, what ends up happening is I get an offer from the Islanders. Mike Milbury's the GM. I get an offer, let's say June 1st it's like May 30th. I get an offer, and it's a very low offer. As far as at that time, the offers weren't structured like they are now. Like at that time, the offers were very signing bonus laden contracts. Like guys would get like $1 million signing bonus or get whatever. And for example, like mine, I think at that time was like $250,000 signing bonus. And everyone else around me got this max signing bonus. And so I guess our thing was, well, we didn't tell you to draft me 9th overall. Like when you bought me at 9th overall, there's something that comes with that. So definitely. I don't know. It was kind of, we pushed back and said, well, that's not going to do it. And Milbury said, well, that's what we're offering them. And then my agent, I think, tried to play a little bit of hardball and said, well, if that's all you're willing to offer Mike, then be prepared to let him go back in the draft. And this was like the evening of the deadline. And Milbury hung up on him. And so at the deadline at that time, I think it was midnight. And it's like, I remember this distinctively. I'm sitting there with my dad. It's around 11:15. And we're like, well, can you call him back? Like, and I'm thinking to myself, I just want to play. Like, I want to go play. The Islanders were, to be frank, the Islanders were trash at the time. So I'm thinking like, I might be able to play for these guys sooner than later. And so they call back. He won't answer the phone. Mike Milbury's not picking up. And then all of a sudden 12 o'clock passes. And I'm like watching the clock. I'm thinking, what just happened? Yeah. And you go to bed that night, you wake up the next morning, and I'm like, did I just make a huge mistake? So I had like 3 weeks leading up to the draft, and that's the option there. If you don't sign, you can go back into the draft, but you're not going to get drafted as high as you did last time, and it kind of changes everything. And the Devils end up taking me in the 3rd round. It was probably the best thing for me because the Devils were an organization that you're going to stay in the minors, you're going to get developed there. They're not going to rush anybody along. So I was able to kind of learn a lot of things in my next 2.5 years playing in Albany in the American Hockey League that would prepare me for the NHL. So it all worked out.
I heard that Milbury was just preparing his cash for Alexi Yashin a couple of years later.
Fans. You know, it's so funny it was that you say that, because so when I was playing in Pittsburgh, do you guys know when was Yash's last year in the league?
Oh, in the entire league. He was
physically playing.
07.
07. Okay.
Bought out June 07.
So you got bought out June 07. I'm playing for the Penguins. This would have been the 9-10, 10-11 season I played for the Penguins. So it was like the 10-11 season. Yep. We're playing with the Islanders, or playing against the Islanders at Nassau Coliseum. And I'm down below. And after the game, come walking out, and Alexi Yashin standing there. I'm like, what's Yashin? You would think when guys get bought out, it's going to be like a separation from them and the team, right? He's still there. I'm like, the guys are like, oh, this guy's getting paid for, between him and Ricky DiPietro, like that organization's been paying a lot of coin for a long time. So Yash was like, he was still kind of like around and collecting money from them for a long time. But it's funny, I'm looking over your guys' shoulder at the Sens jersey. A little side note, you guys are younger than me, so you probably weren't. You guys remember like starter jackets, right? Like starter jackets, like a big thing, right? Like you wear the wrong one in the wrong town, you might get roughed up. They might steal your jacket, right? So I always wanted a starter jacket, and my parents couldn't. They wouldn't necessarily pay for that. We didn't have that kind of money to buy that. And eventually I got to the point where I was getting a starter jacket. And my first starter jacket ever was the inaugural season of the Ottawa Senators. I had a Senators one, and I couldn't tell you anything about the Senators. All I knew, again, it was like me playing hockey. I just wanted something different, right? I was like a kid that wanted to be different than other people.
Tell me it's this one.
No, it had the pockets. It had like the how like the quarterbacks put their hands in those pockets.
Dude, they brought that back. You can buy those this year.
Them now.
Yeah, man.
Really? Because it was like a quarter zip, like I have on, and then it had the pocket right here, and it had a big Sens thing. So I'd wear that thing to school.
That's awesome.
Cleveland, Ohio, and people were like, "What is that?" I'm like, "New NHL teams, new NHL team." I thought it was so cool. I knew nothing about the Sens at the time, but I was like rocking the Sens jersey. I gotta find it, see if my mom still has it. That would be incredible. I was so proud to wear that thing.
Yeah, if you find it, you got to send us a picture of you wearing it.
If I find it, I'll see if my mom still has it. I'll try to hunt it down. And I'll see if I can send it to you guys.
No free ads, but I'm pulling it up right now because they actually do. They're rocking this right now on the Sens team shop. Would you rock one of these or what? Like, that's sharp.
That is sharp. That's not the one, but that is sharp. Yeah,
but that's similar with
all of those. All of those now that are coming back are absolutely incredible. I'd wear any of those. And that's the thing. It's funny. It's like I played for 6 teams. I work at the NHL Network. I'm a fan of gear. I'm a fan of all that stuff. Like I wear, like in the other room, I got my hats. Like I don't know. I have like a Minnesota North Stars hat that I freaking love. I don't know, like I have no affiliation to them whatsoever. I just like it brings me back. Yeah. It's like when you're a kid and you got your favorite jerseys. I love the Sens jerseys and uniforms. I loved Quebec. I love the Nordiques.
Sure.
Like all those throwback things are sick.
Hope you're enjoying our chat with Mike Rupp. We'll get back to it in just a moment. But first, a quick word from our friends at the Glebe Central Pub. It's your neighborhood pub in the heart of the Glebe. Go check them out at 779 Bank Street and let them know that Locked On Senators sent you. Not only are they your neighborhood pub with great drink specials and interactive games, from open mics, from live music. I think they got darts there too. We got to go check it out ourselves at the Glebe Central Pub, and we plan on doing that February 17th. We're going to make sure that we make something happen there at the Glebe Central Pub. So check them out today. Go check out the great menu they have. And if you go to GlebeCentralPub.com, you can also find the shuttle schedule. They are taking a shuttle to and from Ottawa Senators games sporadically throughout the entire year, including tomorrow, Wednesday's game against the Pittsburgh Penguins. Get your $15 round trip ticket right now through the GlebCentralPub.com. There are friends in the heart of the Glebe. Go check them out at 779 Bank Street and make sure that you let them know that Locked On Senators sent you.
And this episode is also brought to you by our friends over at Athletic Greens. Guys, this is something I've made a part of my daily routine, and for a good reason. You guys know I'm a simple guy. I don't want to have to take pills, all these kinds of crazy stuff to stay healthy. With AG1, it's just one scoop in your cup of water every morning, and it tastes great as well. So combine that great taste with 75 vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and more, so you can start your day off right. It helps you with your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging, all these things. And it's lifestyle friendly. So whether you're keto, paleo, you're vegan, you're dairy-free, gluten-free, it's all good. Contains less than 1 gram of sugar, no GMOs, no nasty chemicals or artificial anything. That's why I love it. It's cheaper than your cold brew habit. If you're getting a coffee every day, why not get something more healthy? And right now, it's time to reclaim your health and your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. Just one scoop in your cup of water. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you got to do, guys, is go to athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Again, it's athleticgreens.com/NHL Network to arm your immune system with the best daily nutritional insurance from Athletic Greens. And now, back to our interview with Mike Rupp.
So sick. Hey, start of your career was pretty sick. Played 26 games during the regular season. Were you just odd man out during the postseason? Because we'll get to how you made your debut, but I was looking back, and my first heartbreak as a child, I'm 10 years old. I'm at Game 7, Jeff Friesen, 2 minutes left. Were you upstairs during that game?
So I wasn't even there. I wasn't there for that game. Yeah, it was. So I remember. All right. So that season was my rookie year. I actually got called up on my birthday. So my birthday, January 13th.
By the way.
Thank you. So January 13th, I got called up, and that was obviously my birthday. And I scored 2 goals my first game. I was like, holy crap, here we go. Like, I'm able to, at least I know in that moment, I bought myself a second game. And so I ended up playing 27 games or whatever it was, 26 games that year. And I felt like I did well enough. I mean, I was playing top 6 minutes. I was on the power play, screening the goalie. I felt like I did enough. But I was young and green and wasn't experienced. And Lou Lamoriello went out and picked up Grant Marshall at the deadline, Pascal Rayom, picked up veteran guys who've been around and know how to navigate the NHL playoffs. And at the time, I felt like I was like, oh man, like I didn't feel like it was fair. I felt like I earned a spot, but at that time, it was about getting veterans in those moments. So I was a black ace for the playoffs. I practiced with a group separate from the team, and we would just stay in New Jersey practicing when the team would be going through the playoffs. So no, the first 3 rounds, we didn't even speak to the actual team. We were kind of skating extra. And I remember, I could say this now, but through the first 2 rounds, it's like, I don't know. You're like, all right, this is cool. We get to watch this, but we're not really a part of it. We're not experiencing anything. And if everybody who's a black ace will tell you, and if they don't admit to this, I think they're lying. You don't care if they win or lose. Like, you're like, whatever. I'm not even on the team. You know what I mean? Like, summer starting. Like, you're gonna go back and enjoy. Like, you're skating at that time. We were skating so we like puked every day, and you got to look at the roster, and you're like, well, they already have 3 extra forwards up there, and now I'm skating with 5 extra forwards here. So I have to be. Not only do I have to. There has to be like 4 injuries for it to even get to our group. Now I have to be the best option in our group, and you just start sitting there. And as the round 1 passes, you're like, oh man, we got to do this again for another 2 weeks. And then round 2 passes, you're like, oh man. Then when you get in the round 3 and it's getting close, now you're like getting excited. Like, it's like, oh, well, I'm like kind of witnessing something here. Like, that's really cool. So you start rooting. And I'll tell you what, that Ottawa team was loaded. I mean, you guys know that team was loaded. And I talked to, actually interviewed Marin Hosek a little while back, a couple weeks back ago, actually, from now. And I mentioned him because at the time he was the first guy that I've seen with my own eyes. He battled Scotty Stevens so hard in that series. Like, Scotty would step up to do a Scotty-like hit, and Host would like stand him up. Boom. I'm like, oh, this guy's good. Like, I became a huge Marian Hossa fan from that series. He was gritty. He was skilled. He was a bull. Yeah, it was a battle. But I was in New Jersey, and I saw Jeff Friesen, who in that run was just scoring big goals. That's all he did, is score big goals. And obviously, we were fortunate enough to win that game. And I think that we knew at that time, no knock, because it took us 7 games to beat Anaheim.
Took you 7 games.
We knew that the Stanley Cup was in that Eastern Conference final. Whoever won that Eastern Conference final was going to win the Stanley Cup.
Another kick between the legs, Rupper, because we say that about 2017 with the Sens, with Nashville dealing with all those injuries.
100%. Yeah. I was there for all those games too. And I mean, I honestly don't know if I've seen a more dominant. I don't know if I've seen it. Put it this way. It was as dominant of a performance in the playoffs that I've ever seen from Erik Karlsson. Like, that, he was the best player on planet Earth. Like, he was the best player. And
on one leg too.
On one leg. If anybody's telling you otherwise, they weren't watching, they didn't know he was hurt. He was ridiculous. And I'm not trying to say that the Sens shouldn't have been in that moment, but Erik Karlsson was a huge piece in that moment.
Oh, yeah, dude. Imagine being a fan of the Boston Bruins. You're like, okay, we got the split in round 1 on the road. We're coming home. We were the better team by all respects during the regular season. And then you see Carl do a 100-foot saucer pass on the tape.
Yeah, right on the tape.
Into game 3. You're like, well, okay.
Stupid. The thing with him, too, that always cracked me up is like, I was always a guy that would get in there on the forecheck. I made a living on getting in there on the forecheck and hitting defensemen. And I could never get him. Never get him. He's so slippery. And I was, at the time, later in my career, it wasn't so much. But in probably the first 7 years, 8 years of my career, like, I was in the NHL because I was 6'5" and I could skate really well. And I was a good skater. And it allowed me to get hits on the forecheck and allowed me to. I could never get him, though. And he would skate around and he'd have his chew in his upper lip.
Snooze.
Yeah. He'd just be like, just going around like this. And I'm like, he would never talk shit. And it's like, I liked him. He was just like, you wanted to get him. I could never get him. And he was just like, with him having a chew in, he's just like, just no cares in the world. I'm like, this guy's got life figured out, man.
Yeah. Pilsy's got a question about the Danbury Thrashers, and then I want to get into that 07 playoff series you had against the Sens, where you played a couple of the games, and you actually played the Sens 10 out of 67 of your playoff games because you were in that 2012 series with the New York Rangers. Garbage goalie interference call, by the way, on Nick Foligno in Game 6, or Ottawa has that series. Just so you know. But that aside, getting back to Erik Karlsson, we had Pierre Dorion on, and his first draft as Sens chief amateur scout was picking Erik Karlsson. Not only picking him, but trading up to get him. And Brian Murray, the late, great Brian Murray, was GM at the time. It says, so you want to get this straight. The draft's in Ottawa. You want us to pick 130-pound defenseman. How long do you want to work for me for? And he says a pretty long time. I think that worked out pretty well.
Oh, that's an incredible story. I would love to hear more and learn more about that process, because there was nothing that was screaming that this guy was going to be what he was going to be. So, you know what I mean? So you got to give credit to guys who can put their neck on the line and step out and do something like that and then hit not just a home run. Like, it would have been fine if he was a solid player. I think there was a time in his career where he was the best player on planet Earth.
Yeah. And Daniel Alfredsson went up and made the pick. Like, talk about like the legend in his home rink. Karlsson goes up and licks his lips as he's looking around the stands, like cocky from day one, and he can back up on the ice for sure.
Probably putting a chew in. He's like, "Oh, my name."
Oh yeah, that's me. Yeah. All right. Now chronologically we're at this point, so it's perfect. We got to talk about the Danbury Trashers. I mean, this is just an insane hockey story. And were you surprised when you found out that it was going to be made into a Netflix special, or was that something that you were like, that was a funny moment in time, but like, it's not going to go anywhere. Like, only the true Danbury people are going to know that story. Like, what was your reaction when you found out they were blowing this up?
Yeah. So when all that happened and it all went down, and I just they did an incredible job on the Netflix documentary.
It was so good.
It was awesome. But there's one thing that, again, when you're storytelling and you're doing it in a documentary form or in a movie form, you're only going to make it a couple hours or a couple episodes or whatever you're going to do. So you got to cut some things out. So the one thing that wasn't fully able to grasp is the timeline. So I played year one, the first season of the Danbury Trashers. And I came along, this is the NHL lockout season. I came along probably the end of January, beginning of February of the hockey season. Okay. So we played, my time was there through the playoffs that year. A lot of crazy stuff, like crazy stuff. A lot of it was in there. A lot of it was not in there. The next year, the NHL season was back on, and I was in Arizona. I was playing for the Coyotes, and I got traded to the Columbus Blue Jackets. So I wasn't there. That next year was when more crazy stuff happened. And at the end of that season is when the owner of the team, Jimmy Galante, got raided by the FBI. So I was not there for when the stuff went down. So when it went down and it happened, I had friends on the team that were playing there, that were there the year before with me, and they're telling me this stuff. So I'm only hearing it from word of mouth. It's not like today with social media, right, where you can read about everything. And I'm like, oh no, like, what's happening here? You know, what's going on? And so I remember thinking, like, it just seemed like it dissipated over the next few months. I mean, I played when this documentary came out. I had teammates, some that I played with in the NHL, some that are even still playing now, that are like, I played with you for 5 years. I had no idea about any of this. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. And just never really came up, you know, like we never really spoke about it. But it was like, there was this crazy story, and it was like Slapshot. It was like Slapshot meets. It was Slapshot meets The Sopranos.
Yeah.
And no one's talking about it. When I was playing in Minnesota, my my last couple seasons, this would have been in, like, say it was in 13-14 or 12-13 season, one of the two. I got a message from our PR department that said ESPN Magazine wants to do an article. They want to speak to you. I'm like, all right, what about? And they said it's about this Danbury Trashers team. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I go, can you find out if the Galante family is going to participate in this story? And they asked, and they were not. And so I was like, listen, I've watched enough TV and enough movies. If they're not participating and they're not talking, I'm not talking about anything either. So I said, thank you, but no thanks. And so the ESPN Magazine came out with an article. And I remember when the article came out, again, I don't want to be mentioned in this. I don't want, like, that family treated me like gold. That family was awesome. Like, they were great. And I still in contact with them these days. And so I'm like, don't name me in the article. Don't name me in the article. And I see the article open up. I'm mentioned in the first sentence. I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, why? Like, whatever. So I knew that it was, people were starting to maybe want to tell this story, but then it dissipated after that. And then I got called around, this would have been in probably 2019, I would say, by a Netflix producer. And I said the same thing. Is the Galante family participating? Yep, they are. They're all on board. I'm like, all right, let me get back to you. And I called AJ, who was in the documentary, the 18-year-old GM of the team.
Yeah.
I said, AJ, you guys doing this? Yeah, we're all good. We're all dialed in and partaking in this. I'm like, all right, cool. I'll do it then. And yeah, we just kind of met up and told my side of it. And again, the funny part about that documentary too is I didn't get a preview of it. I didn't know if I was even going to be in it or to what degree I was going to be in it. So I watched it the first time when it went live, just like you guys would or anybody else would. And it was cool watching. I remember the part where they were kind of talking about the NHL lockout. This is probably halfway through it, so I'm not mentioning it to this point. And then they start going on this thing about, you know, I need a bona fide score. I need this and that. And I started leaning at the edge of the couch. I'm like, holy shit, I wonder who they almost got. Like, I'm like, I wonder who they almost got at this, you know? I didn't hear this part of the story. Then they show my face. like I'm a bona fide NHL score. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so that's the stuff I got razzed at. I had guys that I played with, former teammates and guys that are playing that are like, I was dying when they're talking like you were Mario Lemieux.
That's awesome,
Yeah,
man.
they pulled off some incredible PR stunts. I was dying laughing when they're like, we got to have a big reveal. We're going to get Gretzky. We're going to tell everyone we got Gretzky. And hey, they didn't lie. They did get a Gretzky. Maybe they spread or stretched which Gretzky they got, but that was awesome. So you mentioned documentaries. They can't keep everything. What was one of the craziest things you remember that maybe wasn't in there? Or like, what was it like going to the rink when these fans are just going crazy and it's more like a WWE entertainment style rather than like a winning hockey games type of mantra there? Like, what was it like as a player being immersed in all that?
Yeah, so I only needed to play 10 regular season games to qualify for the playoffs. And so I'm going to the team in early February, and so they probably have 30 games left. So they're just like, we don't care when you play. We just need you on 10 games before we get to the playoffs. Like, all right, so here's the deal. Like, I wasn't going to Connecticut and staying there the whole time. I was in Erie, Pennsylvania, and that's where I was living in the off season. And so I practiced with the Erie Otters of the OHL during the week. And then I would just look at the calendar and I'd say, all right, well, when you guys have 3-3 or a couple games over the weekend where I could bang out a few in a row, I'll come in. So they would fly me in and I would just play games, and then I'd fly home and I'd practice with the Otters during the week. And so I'm doing this. So I don't see or know everything that's going on, but one of the crazy things was just they wanted to win more than anything, right? And so one of the things that when I first conversations I had before I went there, I said to Jimmy Galante, I go, Jimmy, here's the deal. Like, I played in the minors for 2.5 years, and I know when a guy gets sent down to the American League that you want to challenge that guy. You might challenge him and you want to dance him with a move. You want to blow by him on the outside. You might just want to run through him with a check. Maybe you want to challenge him physically. It all depends on what kind of player it is and whatever. I mean, you're a target, basically. You're a target when you get sent down from the NHL, because that's your way of saying, hey, that guy was in the NHL. Well, I can do X, Y, and Z better than him. So I go, so I'm coming down to this league. I go, I'm not coming. I have zero interest in coming in and just fighting every night. I'm like, I want to come play hockey. And he goes, cuts me off, and he goes, Michael, he goes, I would like for you, when we get off this phone, to go online and look at our roster. And let's just say nobody will look at you. And I'm like, well, that was interesting. I'm like, okay, well, yeah, I'll check it out. So I went on the roster. I went online, checking the stats. It's like 50 games played or 40 games played. They had 4 guys over 300 penalty minutes at that time. And I started reading some of the names. They're like, this is like underground professional fight, like hockey fight names. Like, I mean, if you have a nickname in between your first and that last name, you're pretty tough. Like that, you know what I mean? I never got like it was never like Mike the Hammer Rupp. It was never that, because I wasn't that tough. Like we had
Nasty Marasti.
Yeah. John Nasty Marasti. You had Frank the Animal Bialois. We had Roman the Nigerian Nightmare Nadur. Wow. We had Brad Wingnut Wingfield. Like, I mean, it was crazy, these guys. And some of the names I recognized, some I didn't, but I know numbers when I see numbers. And this was a tough team, and nobody looked at me. I never had to drop the gloves. I could do whatever I want. It was
You're a rock star down there.
Yeah, I went down there and I was just going around and playing and having. I had such a good time playing there. But so here's one of the stories that was not in the documentary. So Jimmy comes up to me the one day and he goes, Michael, what do you know about Donald Brashear? And I go, oh, okay. I'm like, what do you want to know about him? Like, he's one of the toughest guys in the NHL. And he goes, I'm thinking of bringing him in. I'm like, okay. And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, problem is, I don't remember the number, but he's like, the problem is he wants $500,000 to come in for the rest of the season. And we only had like 20 games left. And I'm like, oh, I'm like, well, that's your decision. I just said, hey, but I'm telling you, like, if you're bringing him in for fighting purpose, no one's going to touch him, Jimmy. Yeah. No one's going to look. No one's going to fight him. Why were they? There's 8 guys in there that are chomping at the bit to fight every night. Like the other teams, this isn't the 70s. They don't have 8 fighters. We had 8 fighters. They have 1. That poor guy, like we go into play teams and they had one tough guy. That guy would be staring at his skate laces the whole time because it's like he has 8 guys that are getting treated like gold over here that know that they are paid to fight. Yeah. And so I was just like, I mean, you do what you want to do, but I mean, it's a lot of cake to have the guy come in for the rest of the season like that. So I don't want to. I wasn't deterring him from getting Donald Brashear. I'm just like, hey, you do whatever. I'm like, honestly, he could play too. He'll be one of our best players. But if you're bringing him in here to fight, no one's going to fight Donald Brashear in this.
There's only so many fights to go around. Yeah,
there's only so many fights to go around. And if you had to pick one, I'd take every other guy's fight before I would take Donald Brashear's fight. So you're not going to get any fights. But that was a crazy thing that these guys wanted to win so bad that he was contemplating paying Brash $500K to finish the season.
That's unreal. What a great story.
Awesome,
Rupper, we appreciate you so much, man. I got one more for you, and we got to get to this because you mentioned it before we started. The Ottawa Senators in 2007, you said one of the most skilled teams you ever faced. You obviously were with the New Jersey Devils at the time, had a 5-game series, second round of the playoffs. As a goalie growing up, man, Marty Brodeur, Ray Emery was my guy, having them go toe-to-toe, and there's a great photo of them shaking hands after that series. And you could tell Emery's like, I got you here, but if we do this 5 times, you probably get me the other 4. What was it like being in that series?
Yeah, it was incredible. And you mentioned it before. Like, I played against Ottawa a lot in the playoffs, and it was hard every single time, every time. And I give that to like different times, different guys they had there. I'm a big Mike Fisher fan, big Chris Neal fan, although I couldn't stand Neal playing against him. But
you guys fought.
Yeah, and Matt Carkner used to chase me around all the time, trying to fight me, and it was tough. But the one thing that they always had really good with the Sens, you knew you were going to play. It's going up there and playing, and you knew you were going to have a hard game. It's never easy, never a pushover. Like, it was always going to be a hard game. And it was that's something that was incredible. And Ray Emery, I got a Ray Emery story. Play against him in the OHL, and when guys would call him Sugar Ray, and we knew he was tough. Knew he had like a boxing background, and I was lined up for a face-off, and it was in the offensive zone. So Ray Emery's defensive zone. He was on the other team, and he's standing there, and I'm lined up on, like, I was playing wing. I was on the arc. And all of a sudden I hear, hey, Rupper, you want to go? And I'm like, I go like this. I thought it was the defenseman lined up next to me. I look at him. He goes, like, wasn't me. And I like look back, and Ray Emery stand up in there. He's like, hey, let's go. The face off right from him. I'm like, what? And so the puck drops, and he starts skating out of the crease, and he's like, Rupper, come on, let's go. Let's do this. And I'm thinking to myself, is this some kind of trick? Like, I've never seen a goal. Like, what am I supposed to just square up with the goalie in the middle of the play? Like, that would have been incredible. But he was nuts, man. He was a good goalie too. So he left a mark, I know, with a lot of different guys. I didn't know him personally, but he was always revered as being a great teammate. So but always tough against the Sens. Even when in 2012, when I was with the Rangers and we were all the way down to the wire going for the President's Trophy with the Vancouver Canucks, we should have been a heavy favorite. We were a heavy favorite against Ottawa in the first round. It took us 7 games, man. We almost lost that series. Like, that team was feisty too. Yeah. They were good, man.
Interference calls in game 6, both on Nick Foligno. They ship him out for Mark Mathod after that season. Dude, you brought up Matt Carkner. I mean, I have to follow up 2012. I think it was game 1, Dubinsky. Somebody was giving the business to Erik Karlsson, just giving him a little howdy do. And then Matt Carkner took it into his own hands to just one punch in the corner. I forget who it was, but how is the conversations around your locker room? And Brandon Dubinsky, maybe an all-time moment where he grabbed the Gatorade bottle on his way out, or not the bottle, the whole jug where you're pouring from. And he went, you talk about WWE, he went full,
He went
full
off.
flip on that one.
Yeah. So
how was the team going around it there?
Karks ended up getting Brian Boyle.
Brian Boyle, that's who it was. And Neil got him later in the series too.
Yeah. And so that was tough because there's a couple moments like, listen, those guys are tough as nails. Like, I tried to avoid Matt Carkner. I seen Matt Carkner do damage. Listen, if I had to fight him, I fought him the one time, he jumped me. I didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
I would have no problem fighting Matt Carkner if I had to. But if I didn't have to, I wasn't going to fight him. Why would I do that? Like, he's tough as nails, you know what I mean? And so he would sit there and just he was tough, man. And I remember, like, that was the thing with that Sens team. It's like they had a few guys, you know, and that's the thing too. Fish was tough as nails too. Like, no one gives him enough credit for the way he could drop gloves. And Foligno, like, we've seen Foligno, you know, what he was capable of doing. I mean, they had a lot of tough guys, but yeah, I remember that that was the tough part, because I was with that team. When you see that happen, and the player that I was at that point in my career, I wanted to do something about it, but it's so hard in the playoffs to get guys back or to go and do those things. So sometimes you just got to take it, right? And we just had to take it. And that happened, if you remember, the whole Sean Avery in front of Marty Brodeur. That was on that team. And I wanted to kill him. Like, David Clarkson and I wanted to kill Sean Avery. How are we going to do that? Like, we go out there and he was so good at his craft at doing that. Chris Neal was so good at getting under your skin and making you want to get him. You never could get him, though. The difference between the two of those, Chris Neal was tough as nails. So if you did get him, you might lose that fight. But he was very good at doing it, getting out, and then, all right, you want to do something about it? You guys are going to have to take a penalty here. So those are tough moments. And that one was one where, Karks got Brian Boyle, and we really couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah, that's those were some wild playoff series back in the day. But final question for me, Rupp, and thanks so much for giving us so much time here. This has been awesome. You mentioned at the start that the Sens were a team that you really liked this year. Let's bring it back to the modern day Sens here. It's a young team. They got some big acquisitions in the offseason. They're trying to take this next step from rebuilding for the last, I can't remember how many years. What is it that you think they need to do to finally take that step? Because it seems like they're trying to take that, but it's not happening quite yet.
Yeah, I see. I think think of it from this standpoint. Like, the Rangers made the Eastern Conference Finals last year. They were 2 games away from the Stanley Cup.
Yep.
That was way ahead of schedule. And the expectations that come out of that are probably not fair. So this year, 2 games into the season, 3 games in the season, or however many games in the season, people want Gerard Gallant fired. They want, like, what's going on here? Because the expectations were set. And it probably shouldn't have been set that high. The Sens offseason was such a home run that all of a sudden you're throwing a team that missed the playoffs by 30-plus points last year to being like, oh, this team's going to make the playoffs. I did it, and I get paid to do this job. And I'm like, this team can make the playoffs. Making up 30 points in the NHL, and obviously that's a guesstimate of where the cutoff line will be. That's almost historic to change that much. Remember back when, it's probably around the 2014 time when Colorado had that, like, 38-point swing or 40-point swing. That was like the biggest swing from one season to the next in NHL history. We're basically asking the Sens, or we had some expectations on the big talk was the Sens, the Wings, the Devils, and the Buffalo was all kind of in that same boat. And because the offseason was so big and this team is so loaded, and I will take their top 6. I say this through and through. I will take their top 6 healthy of the Sens with any top 6 in the National Hockey League. Give me any top 6, and I will say this top 6 is just as talented and has intangibles that any other one would have. That doesn't mean that they're the best top 6 right now, but they have the potential of being that. So I think the one thing with this Sens team, they just got to keep going through it. They got to grind through it. Norris, I love Norris. Having him out hurts them immensely this season in a big, big way, right? He's a gamer. I think they're going to have a really tough decision on how to handle this DeBrincat situation. They've got a lot of contracts and money and term out there right now, and I love the decisions they've made, but they're kind of committed to that now. So we'll see where they go from here. But this is a group they're potent, man. Brady's one of my favorite players in the National Hockey League. And I guess when you're looking at this season, he's been a stud still. He's still getting it done. You know, they're in good hands, I think. So it's part of that process, man. You got to get a real sour taste in your mouth. I don't think there's expectations as much last season. So when last season ended the way it did, and you have all these things happen as far as picking up, DeBrincat and Giroux and kind of going through what they did in the offseason, signing these guys the extension, that's not a bitter taste in your mouth. That's excitement. I think this team needs a dose of some bitterness, and maybe this season will do that, and we'll see how they respond next year. So I'm not all down on them. I think the future's super bright. They're just going through it right now, and I think you can find a lot about who you want to move forward with by going through these moments.
Well, the Sens have 4 losses in their last 5 games, so it's going to be a healthy dose of optimism for them having you on the show and reminiscing about some of the past days. And it was great getting to know more about your career as well. I know we kept you long. We really appreciate your time, man. I know you're taking the kids down to All-Star Weekend. Enjoy that. Need to get a photo with the 2 Kachuk brothers for sure. Yes, and then hopefully we can do this a little bit later on in the year, Rupper. We really appreciate your insight.
Awesome, guys. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, Pillsy, stick taps to Rupper for joining us. What a phenomenal conversation with him. I know we took him a little long, but he seemed to enjoy it. I mean, the answers almost got better and better throughout that entire interview, so we can't wait to have him back on again. And make sure you're following him on Twitter at Rupper17. This guy, a great analyst, and talk about a great career, eh? Coming in, scoring a Stanley Cup clinching goal as a rookie, 3 points in a 3-0 win in Anaheim, or in New Jersey against Anaheim that year where Jean-Sébastien Giguère was the Conn Smythe winner despite losing. Amazing career, and we had so much more to get into him about the media side, but a nice note with the Sens. He's saying stay optimistic. The long-term outlook is still positive.
Yeah, that was a great chat, and I'm so glad we got to talk to him about the Danbury Trashers as well. If you guys haven't seen this story, it's a must-watch. Even if you're not a hockey fan, it's an absolutely crazy story. Check it out. The documentary is on Netflix, and Mike Rupp does a great job of kind of letting us know what happened behind the scenes as well.
Tomorrow on Locked On Senators, Scott Wheeler from The Athletic. Wheeler's doing his prospect pool rankings, and he has the Ottawa Senators at number 24. Now, before you panic, before you get mad at the list, I think it's a really well written up. Pillsy, I've already read it. It just came out before we recorded. I know you're going to do your prep before we interview him tomorrow, but I'm excited to pick his brain about a few of the positions he has. But all in all, we did last week our top 10 Sens prospects. It's extremely similar to what he put out. So I do have a few questions for him, but we'll save it for there. If you have a subscription to The Athletic, go check that out. If not, you can find out tomorrow on our show where he has certain guys and the long-term outlook that he sees for Sens prospects.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of did him a favor. We gave him a cheat sheet to work off, and I mean, makes sense. He's going to just plug it in and play it, so we don't blame Scott there.
Hey, with how Sens fans have treated him in the past, this way you can kind of hide behind our shield in a way. It's like, hey, get mad at the Locked On guys then. But no, all jokes aside, and I mean, what I like about Scott is he's not afraid to admit when he's wrong. So we'll press him on a couple things with that, of course. But it'll be a fun conversation tomorrow. But for today, we say goodbye. Thank you to Mike Rupp for joining us. For Brandon Piller, I'm Ross Levitan. This has been the Locked On Senators podcast. Your team every day.